かずもたくさんあって、タンパク質とかそのビタミン、ミネラルとか全てを補充する。本当にリュウイチ君と組んで。
Reporters from every corner of the world have hurled that question at them again and again. Under the blinding flash of TV cameras, in packed post-competition press rooms, in the chaotic mixed zones after races, and every single time, Miura Riku simply smiled and gave the same answer. I'll leave that to your imagination. No denial, no confirmation. Just a perfect, polished smile, and the topic cleanly and professionally closed. It was the answer of a pro. Almost too perfect. But there is one place in the world where that answer simply doesn't work. A small kitchen in Oakville, Canada. Because in that kitchen, there's no such thing as leave it to your imagination. There are only facts. A pot on a lit stove, that's a fact. A meal set out on the dinner table, that's a fact. Someone dragging their exhausted body to that stove and lighting the flame for someone else, that is a fact. And facts like that, you can't deflect them with a smile. You can't wrap them in pretty words the way you'd answer a reporter's question. They just exist, for 7 years, multiple times a week, in the quiet of nights when nobody was watching those facts quietly stacked up. Today, we're talking about that kitchen. Not the medals, not the 158.13 points, not the all-time record score, or those 30 breathtaking seconds on the ice in Milan. We're talking about something far smaller, far more ordinary, but more honest than any of it. We're talking about a curry pot, an omelet rice pan, a car cutting through the darkness every single morning, and what all of that knew about what leave it to your imagination truly meant. When people tell the story of Kimura Ryuichi, they usually start with the Olympics, Sochi 2014, Pyeongchang 2018, and then Milan 2026 gold medal, the most consecutive Olympic appearances in Japanese figure skating history. And yes, all of that is real. All of that alone is enough to define a remarkable life. But to truly understand Ryuichi, you have to go back to 2019. In 2019, Ryuichi was working at an ice rink polishing rental skates for strangers. A man who had stood on Olympic ice was now kneeling to wipe down other people's boots. Chronic shoulder pain had pushed him to his limit. The mental exhaustion had piled up. And somewhere along the way, the fire he once had for the sport had quietly burned itself out. He was close to the end of a dream, just quietly passing the time, unsure of his next step, unsure if he even had one left. He may have been too drained to even think about it. Then a message arrived. The sender was Miura Riku, 17 years old, born in Takarazuka, Hyogo Prefecture, 145 centimeters tall, with a background in rhythmic gymnastics and karate. She wanted to try pairs skating, and out of all the skaters she could have reached out to, for some reason she chose him. It was July 2019. Ryuichi later admitted he was completely thrown off. A girl of 17 was asking to partner up with a guy currently polishing rental shoes, of course, that would catch you off guard. But the moment they actually faced each other on the ice, something shifted inside him. The instant we skated together for the first time, I thought, this is the real thing. That's what he said at a later press conference. A gut feeling that ran through him like electricity. In August 2019, they officially became a pair. And that's where the real challenge began. Japan simply didn't have the infrastructure to train pairs skaters at a world competitive level. If they wanted to compete on the global stage, they had to go abroad. So they packed their bags and headed to Oakville, Ontario, Canada, coached by Bruno Marcotte and Lauriane Murchison. Language barriers, a completely different climate, an unfamiliar country. That alone would be enough to crush most people. But on top of all that, there was one very practical, very pressing problem: money. To keep living costs down, eating out became a rare treat reserved for special occasions only. The default was cooking at home. After grinding through brutal training sessions, they'd drag their worn-out bodies into the kitchen and cook because food is part of the sport. What you eat directly shapes how your body performs the next day. You can't afford to cut corners, but they were exhausted, and time was always running short. So Ryuichi's solution? Curry. Because it's the easiest thing to make, he later laughed. And honestly, he's right. Chop some vegetables, throw in the meat, dissolve the udon, make a massive pot, and you've got leftovers for tomorrow too. For a busy athlete, it's hard to find a more efficient meal. So yes, curry, because it's easy, completely logical, completely reasonable. Except here's the thing you need to sit with for a moment. Ryuichi's apartment was his alone. Riku was a minor at the time, staying with a host family. Strictly speaking, if Ryuichi was cooking just for himself, a single serving would have been plenty. But instead, he'd bring Riku back to his apartment after practice and cook for both of them. No one asked him to. No one obligated him. Sure, you could call it a senior looking out for a junior. A 2-6 year. Old man taking care of his 1-7 year. Old partner who was still new to life abroad. A perfectly reasonable act of team consideration. That explanation works. It's completely logical. Except that senior looking out for a junior kept happening week after week, month after month, year after year, for 7 years. That curry made because it was easy kept showing up on that table for 7 years. And at some point, you have to ask yourself, can the word easy really carry the full weight of that? Every time he stood in front of that pot, was he really not thinking about her? Wasn't he thinking, if she eats this, she'll have the energy for tomorrow's training. Her tired body will recover just a little. Because here's the thing, at the time, 7-year-old Riku was quietly struggling with homesickness, though she rarely showed it. Everything hit her at once. The unfamiliar life abroad, the language barrier in English, mastering pairs skating technique from scratch after rhythmic gymnastics, navigating the coaching staff, all of it, simultaneously. On those nights exhausted, far from home, what did it mean for Riku to walk into a place where a warm meal was already waiting? It didn't have to be extraordinary food, it just had to be warm. That was enough. The simple fact that someone had lit the stove for her, that must have softened the loneliness of those foreign nights, even just a little. And it wasn't just dinner. Every single morning, Ryuichi drove to Riku's host family's house to pick her up. She was still underage, no Canadian driver's license. So, before his own practice, Ryuichi made the trip every morning, without fail. Rain or shine, Canadian winters. Mornings so dark the sky hadn't even decided to wake up yet. Of the 365 days in a year, they spent 360 of them together. That eventually became known as the secret behind Riku's strength, but back then, it was just their everyday life. Something born out of necessity, but also something chosen. Choosing to drive for someone every morning. Choosing to cook for someone every night. The man who stacked those choices, and the woman who received them for 7 years when you try to describe that relationship as simply skating partners. Where exactly do the morning drives and the nightly curry fit? Then there's the omelet rice incident. One evening, Riku sighed and told him, "If you keep making omelet rice, the cleanup afterward is a nightmare." Apparently, the ketchup left in the pan was a pain to scrub off. When fans heard this story, they laughed. But I think in the same breath, most of them also realized something. You don't complain about the cooking of someone you barely know. You don't tell a stranger, your cleanup is too hard after they've cooked for you. With people you keep at a professional distance, you just smile, say thank you, it was delicious, and leave it at that. You can only complain when the distance has closed enough, when you know the other person will catch it without breaking. And Ryuichi? He caught it. No anger, no hurt feelings, he just made omelet rice again. While Riku kept eating it, grumbling about the cleanup, he kept making it. A man who keeps getting complaints and keeps cooking anyway. A woman who keeps complaining and keeps eating anyway. What exactly do you call that relationship? Of course, you could explain it away. 7 years of being together as teammates, you naturally get comfortable enough to say what's on your mind. That's all it is. But there's a subtle difference between being comfortable enough to complain and complaining while still eating every single bite. The first is about familiarity. The second is something else entirely. What that something is? Well, I'll leave that to your imagination. Then came the move. At some point, Riku relocated to a different unit in the same apartment building. Her homestay days were over, and she was now living under the same roof as Ryuichi. The official explanation? Stability in their living environment and improved training efficiency. And yes, that makes perfect sense. Same building means easier morning pickups, late-night strategy sessions, keeping tabs on each other's physical condition. Logical reasons across the board. But here's what nobody mentions. Oakville has plenty of apartments. Closer to the rink, more convenient for errands, the options were everywhere. Out of all of them, why this building? Why the same one? There's no official answer to that question. And if a reporter ever dared to ask, I think you already know what the response would have been. I'll leave that to your imagination. After Riku moved in, the kitchen changed. It was no longer just Ryuichi cooking. Riku started cooking too. Together they'd eat, clean up, and prepare for the next day's training. That quiet, steady cycle slowly and surely built something between them, a shared daily life. And right around this time, their competitive results started climbing sharply. The 2022 to 2023 season, World Championships, 4 continents, Grand Prix final, a triple crown. The first Japanese pairs team in history to win an annual Grand Slam. Experts pointed to technical improvements, program refinement, lift precision, synchronization scores. all measurable, all quantifiable. But Riku said something different. She said, "The foundation of everything is the trust between me and Ryuichi. Not technique, trust." And where was that trust built? Not in a state-of-the-art training facility. Not through scientific nutrition management or cutting-edge coaching. Part of the answer, a real part, was in those nights in a small Oakville kitchen, watching a curry pot slowly simmer. A personal note here. When I first heard this kitchen story, I genuinely couldn't move for a moment. Not the gold medal, not the 158.13 points, not the 30 seconds of magic on Milan ice. It was the most unremarkable, most ordinary fact: a man who kept making curry and a woman who kept making omelet rice, that told the story of 7 years more honestly than anything else could. People talk about fateful encounters like they only happen in dramatic, cinematic moments. But maybe that's not quite right. Maybe fate is built in the countless nights in front of a stove, in the countless mornings eating breakfast while trading complaints, and that is why Riku could later say, without hesitation, that their meeting was destiny. Behind those words, I'll leave that to your imagination. I can't help but feel the warmth of that kitchen, still glowing. In the autumn of 2022, just days before a competition, Riku's left shoulder dislocated, a freak training accident at the worst possible time. Her body broke down at the single most catastrophic moment it could have chosen. The exact details of where Ryuichi was and what happened next haven't been made public, but he later described his reaction in 4 words. "I thought my heart stopped." You could read that as an athlete's response, a partner injured right before a major event, plans in disarray, the next competition now in jeopardy. That interpretation is completely valid. Except, "I thought my heart stopped" isn't really the language people use when they're calculating competitive losses. That's the language that escapes you when someone you care about gets hurt, when your body goes cold before your brain even has time to process it. Was Ryuichi's first instinct about the impact on their skating? Or was it something else? I'll leave that to your imagination. That night, what was the atmosphere in that Oakville kitchen like? Riku was in pain. Ryuichi was feeling something. Did someone still make curry out of habit? Or did neither of them touch a thing? Only 2 people in the world know what happened in that kitchen that night. And neither of them has spoken about it in public. Maybe they don't need to. Maybe they can't. The difference between those two, well, I'll leave that to your imagination as well. Riku pushed through the injury and competed. She stood on that ice carrying pain. Ryuichi lifted her exactly as always, yet knowing something that wasn't there before. When the performance ended, the 2 of them sat quietly side by side, waiting for the scores. A camera caught their expressions in that moment. Whatever words were exchanged, the microphone didn't pick them up. They were just there, together. That's all. Then in 2023, it was Ryuichi's turn. Diagnosed with lumbar spondylolysis, he was forced to withdraw from multiple competitions. After years of pushing a body to its absolute limits, it finally sent an undeniable signal. It was his first prolonged absence from competition. No training, no competing, no standing on the ice with his partner. What did Ryuichi feel, day after day, during those weeks? The rehab, the frustration, the helplessness of only being able to watch from a distance. That's when Riku said something that stopped everyone. Without Ryuichi, there's no meaning to being a pair. Read that slowly. Without Ryuichi, there's no meaning to being a pair. If you read it purely as an athlete speaking about their competitive partner, it means, we can't win without him. We can't hit our scores. Sure, that's part of it. But notice Riku didn't say we can't win. She said there's no meaning. What exactly did Riku pour into the word pair? Was it only the scores? Or was there also the car that came every morning for 7 years and the nights that always ended at a curry pot? And think about what it meant to stand on that rink every day during Ryuichi's absence. Jumps you can do alone, spins you can do alone, but lifts, pair spins, the feel of side-by-side movement, the muscle memory of moving as 2, none of that can be confirmed without the other person. Every single day, Riku stood on the ice, staring at the space where Ryuichi was supposed to be. The weight of those words, there's no meaning to being a pair, only Riku truly understood, standing alone on that ice, feeling that absence. Ryuichi recovered. He fought through rehabilitation, and they finally stepped back onto the ice together. Whatever happened in that first practice back, they haven't said much about it. There was just the fact of his return. And in the kitchen, Ryuichi came back too. The curry pot went back on the flame. March 2025. Boston, USA. World Championships. They claimed their 2nd world title. On the podium, they were both smiling, a moment that could genuinely be called the pinnacle of their careers. But that night, whether at the celebration dinner or in the car on the way back, maybe they were both thinking about something else entirely. Because on the flight home to Japan the next morning, somewhere over the Pacific, they made a decision together. Milan would be their last. Who brought it up first? What word started that conversation? How long did they talk about it? None of that has been shared. But what we do know is this: that decision was made by two people, sitting side by side, on the same plane, at the same moment. Not one deciding and the other following. Two people looking in the same direction, at the same time. 7 years of sharing meals in the same kitchen, and now their biggest, heaviest decision was also made in the same place. February 17, 2026. Milan Cortina. Winter Olympics free skate. Coming off a short program score of 73.11. Sitting in 5th place, they went out and produced 158.13 points. A new all-time world record. A gold medal. The greatest score in the history of the sport. And somewhere out there, a curry pot that had been quietly lit for 7 years was finally perfectly set down to rest. 231.24 total points. Japan's first ever Olympic gold medal in pairs figure skating. The moment the performance ended, Ryuichi pulled Riku into an embrace. No words, just silence for roughly 30 seconds. Cameras from around the world locked onto that moment. American media ran the headline, Miura and Kihara, a love story on ice. The entire world began asking what those 30 seconds of silence actually meant. But the two of them never answered. I'll leave that to your imagination. What happened in those 30 seconds, whether Ryuichi whispered something into her ear? What Riku felt in that moment, nobody knows. Nobody except one place, the kitchen. Only that kitchen, the one that witnessed every curry night from the autumn of 2019 onward, every omelet rice morning, every pre-dawn drive, the night a shoulder dislocated, the winter a back gave out. Only that kitchen truly understands what those 30 seconds meant. On the 7th of April, 2026, they announced their retirement on social media simultaneously. At the exact same hour, the exact same minute. Different words. Identical timing. That was no coincidence. They coordinated it. The heaviest decision of their lives, they delivered to the world together. At the same moment, 11 days later, on April 28th, a retirement press conference was held in Tokyo. Cameras, flashes, reporters all gathered. The two of them walked in. Riku was composed. Ryuichi's eyes were red. He began his prepared speech. Somewhere in the middle, the words stopped coming. His voice trembled. A silence of about 30 seconds stretched across the room. And then Riku quietly said, "Please don't cry." Cameras caught it. That moment was broadcast around the world. People sat with those 3 words for a long time. What kind of relationship allows you to say, "Please don't cry" to someone who is crying? Not comforting them, not silently watching over them, but firmly, gently calling them back from that precise distance. Isn't that the same distance that lets you complain about omelet rice cleanup? The same kind of intimacy, unguarded, yet built on something immovably deep? You could explain it as professional consideration, Riku, reminding Ryuichi to hold himself together in a public setting as a fellow competitor who'd built years of trust. That explanation is completely valid. But after Riku said those words, Ryuichi took a deep breath and continued. And what he said next was this: "Thank you for 7 years." Those words were directed at Riku. Not gratitude for the gold medal, not gratitude for their competitive career. Gratitude for 7 years. Inside those 7 years, hundreds of curry nights, hundreds of early morning drives, dozens of complaints about omelet rice, the night a shoulder dislocated, the winter a back broke down, the conversation on a flight home from Boston. Every single one of those things compressed into 6 syllables. Thank you for 7 years. At the very end of the press conference, a reporter fired that question one more time. What will your relationship look like after retirement? Riku smiled and answered, "I'll leave that to your imagination." Perfect. As always, absolutely perfect. But 2 weeks later, they were standing together on ice again. In front of 2,503 people in Nishinomiya, Hyogo, 2 retired athletes who had no business being on a competitive rink, were back on the same ice. Ryuichi lifted Riku. Not a scored lift, not a competitive lift, just a lift. And Riku settled into her position on his hands, exactly as she always had. 2,503 people held their breath. When the performance ended, Riku took the microphone and said, "In pairs skating, I believe that meeting your partner is destiny." Destiny. She chose that word herself. No reporter led her there, no interviewer planted it. Riku, at 24 years old, called her encounter with a man 9 years her senior destiny. If anyone dared ask her what that word meant, I think we all know how she'd answer. I'll leave that to your imagination. That same day, they announced a brand new ice show. The title, Destiny, which in Japanese translates to destiny. Riku explained the title like this: I chose it because I believe meeting my partner was destiny. Ryuichi described their vision for the show. We want to use a full competition-sized rink, the same speed, the same intensity you'd feel at a real event. A show called Destiny, produced together, with the person they call Destiny. Even after the competitive titles are gone, they chose to stand on the same stage. In a world without scores, without judges, without rankings, they still chose the same ice. And there's one more thing. When asked about their future plans, both of them spoke about getting coaching certifications and eventually establishing an academy together. Not Kimura Academy, not Miura Academy. The Miura Kimura Academy. Both names, together, inseparable. Even after retirement, even after the competitor title disappears, their names cannot be separated. Maybe no explanation is needed for that. That's just the way it is. The 7 years of curry nights ended with retirement. The Oakville kitchen is no longer their shared daily world. But what that kitchen taught them, that hasn't ended. What it means to drive for someone every single morning. What it means to light the stove for someone even when you're exhausted. What it means to keep eating even while complaining. What it means to feel your heart stop the moment someone you care about gets hurt. What it means to need someone so completely that the word pair loses all meaning without them. That kitchen spent 7 years quietly teaching both of them all of that. When Destiny's curtain rises, they'll stand side by side on the ice. No scores, no competition, just two people in the same place. That's all. And yet that single, quiet fact says far more than the words, "I'll leave that to your imagination," ever could. One last personal thought. For a long time, I kept thinking about the quiet strength carried inside those words, "I'll leave that to your imagination." It's not a denial. It's not a confirmation. But now I think it might actually be the most honest answer possible. Because the word that describes their relationship, it simply hasn't been invented yet. Not lovers in the conventional sense. Not just colleagues. Not quite family either. Two people who cooked in the same kitchen for 7 years, whose hearts both stopped over the same injury, who made their retirement decision on the same flight, who held each other wordlessly on the ice, who, even now, are building something with both their names on it. No one has coined the word for what they are to each other. And so, "I'll leave that to your imagination" is truly the only answer that fits. And if somewhere in that imagination, you can smell the faint warmth of curry drifting from a small kitchen in Oakville, I think that's a very beautiful thing to imagine. So what do you imagine?